Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker and today's video is episode 3 of my NBA expansion draft series in which I'm going through the entire NBA, picking out which players I would or would not protect in a potential expansion draft scenario, and then in the last few videos of the series I will be doing an entire expansion draft for 2 new teams. I'll put the rules up on the screen as I always do, and I will also mention that I have done 2 previous episodes in this series that you can check out as well. In this video, we're going to be doing the Central Division, so the Bucks, Pacers, teams like that, and in the next video, it will be the Southwest Division, which is the Rockets and the Mavericks. So keep an eye out for that. Do some homework ahead of time if you want to, so you can kind of follow along, compare who you would or wouldn't protect with who I did or did not. And with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into it. But really quickly before we do, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. Okay, so we begin with the Milwaukee Bucks, and they have 11 players under contract. Again, we can only protect 8 of them, and there's actually some really interesting decisions to make here. And you're gonna be surprised by the people that I leave unprotected here. I'm gonna go ahead and show you who that is, and then I'll talk about it. Ersan Ilyasova, Robin Lopez, and DJ Wilson are gonna be the 3 players that I'm leaving unprotected here. And the one name that you're looking on here and you're realizing, why is Giannis's brother being protected? He hasn't really done anything in the NBA. Because you're not going to do anything to bug Giannis at this point. Like, if DJ Wilson has to go into the expansion draft and probably get picked up, and instead of, Giannis's brother potentially leaving, then you're going to do that. Now, the argument could certainly be made that you protect DJ Wilson and Giannis's brother goes into the expansion draft and nobody picks him because he hasn't really done anything. But still, I feel like it's worth protecting him just to make sure that Giannis isn't upset or has any reason to be upset at the franchise, right? So that's the first surprise here. The other difficult decisions to be made were, Ilyasova and Lopez are important parts of the front court for this team, but I just ultimately felt like I would rather have Wes Matthews, Dante DiVincenzo, George Hill, players like that, because there's a couple of these, Giannis, Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe, Brook Lopez, and to a certain extent, George Hill, all those guys are going to be protected. So the conversation came down to those bottom 6, Ilyasova, Lopez, Wilson, DiVincenzo, Matthews, and Antetokounmpo, obviously Giannis' brother, not Giannis himself. And I would rather have the wing depth. I feel like it's pretty easy to pick up, another 5-man potentially in the front court that you need for depth down the road. You could certainly make an argument that you keep DJ Wilson instead of Wesley Matthews. You keep Robin Lopez or Ilyasova instead of Wesley Matthews, but I like having him as a shooter. I like having that much perimeter depth, especially on a team like the Bucks that has Brook Lopez, that has Giannis, that has Chris Middleton, bigger guys that provide some versatility within the lineup, and really you just need to add, an extra 5-man in this roster would be completely fine, assuming that Ilyasova, Lopez, Wilson, assuming some of those guys do get drafted in the expansion draft. So those are the players that I'm leaving unprotected for some kind of roundabout reasons, but I feel good about that group. Next up now, the Indiana Pacers, who have 12 players under contract, and to this point, this was probably the most difficult team to figure out who I would and would not leave protected or unprotected. So obviously Oladipo, Brogdon, Turner, TJ Warren, those guys are going to be staying, in recent draft picks like Batadze. I always mess up how to say his last name, but he's going to stay, right? These are the players I'm leaving unprotected. Jeremy Lamb, TJ McConnell, TJ Leaf, and Edmond Sumner. And the surprise name on this list is probably Jeremy Lamb, right? Like, you're probably wondering, this guy was a pretty big part of the rotation, good scorer, can shoot. Why is Jeremy Lamb being left unprotected? Well, it came down to having to pick between Lamb, McDermott, and Aaron Holiday, I guess, would be the other one, because I feel like everybody else is pretty solidly, a player you would want to keep and protect, either because they're a recent draft pick or because they're a good player. And it really just has to do with Jeremy Lamb's injury, and he had a pretty significant knee injury that ended his season, and that is more of a question mark moving forward in terms of, whether he's going to be healthy and a big part of this team, or if he's going to really struggle to come back from that injury. And he had a better season than someone like McDermott, so if everything else was equal, if he never got hurt, McDermott is probably the guy that we're leaving unprotected here. But because of the injury, I am going to leave Lamb unprotected, and then I'm keeping Aaron Holiday as well because TJ McConnell is already going to be up for an expansion draft here, and I'd rather have a little bit more guard depth and a good backup point guard there in Aaron Holiday as well. TJ Leaf, TJ McConnell, Edmond Sumner, I feel like are pretty easy ones to leave the protection off of here, and Jeremy Lamb was really the most difficult decision here. Next up now, the Chicago Bulls, who have 12 players under contract, so we're leaving 4 unprotected, and this continues a theme of this division being the most interesting group to this point that I've done in this expansion draft series. And I'm just going to go and tell you who I'm leaving unprotected. Thaddeus Young, Cristiano Felicio, Ryan Arcidiacono, and Luke Cornett. Those are the 4 guys that I'm leaving unprotected. Some decisions that were made here. I like Daniel Gafford as a potential rotation big moving forward. I wanted to keep him. Chandler Hutchinson, same thing, but on the wing, if he can stay healthy and he can continue to develop, I think he can be a good wing for them. And then the conversation really became Satoransky or Thaddeus Young. And I understand that those guys provide more to the team right now than Hutchinson and Daniel Gafford, but this isn't a right now team, in my opinion, in Chicago. And I'd rather have, the backup point guard that is Satoransky. And I didn't like the Thaddeus Young contract at the time last year. He didn't have a great season. And I would just rather have these other guys on the roster than him. And I would imagine he would get picked in the expansion draft as well, which takes his salary off the books, which is good for the Bulls as well. So you're keeping, pretty much the entire core here. You're prioritizing some of the younger players, and then you're giving up someone that is a veteran and a solid player in Thaddeus Young, but just doesn't quite fit all that well for me in Chicago, and I'd rather keep the other guys. So that's who we're leaving unprotected for the Bulls. Okay, moving on now. This is the most interesting team by far that I've had to deal with in this expansion draft series so far, and it's the Detroit Pistons. They have 8 players under contract, which means they are only going to leave 1 guy unprotected. And as you're looking at the roster, it might seem pretty simple that someone like Bruce Brown or Kyrie Thomas is going to be left unprotected here. You keep the rest of the core of the roster. Maybe even you make a case for Tony Snell or somebody to try and save some money, right? But the more that I thought about it, the more that I looked at the roster and the potential direction of the Detroit Pistons moving forward, and the potential value of Blake Griffin moving forward, I think you're leaving Blake unprotected here. And I know that sounds crazy, but given his contract situation, he's got multiple years left, being paid over $35 million under the current cap rules, and the fact that he hasn't been healthy. He had a really good year last year, right? Wasn't healthy in the postseason though, and then really struggled to get healthy this year as well. And I just really question Blake Griffin's place in the league right now as a positive trade asset, right? Because the argument here is, why would you leave Blake unprotected in a draft that he's more than likely going to be picked despite his salary concerns and injury concerns? Why would you do that when you could just trade him? Well, I think at this point, until Blake Griffin comes back and shows that he is fully healthy and a positive asset, which I think is questionable that he's going to do that at all, it's going to be really tough to get rid of him without giving up draft compensation. So why not, open up some payroll, especially in the circumstances we're going to be going into here with what is probably going to be a lower salary cap moving forward once the league does come back. I think it makes the most sense to get rid of Blake Griffin here, leave him unprotected, hope he gets picked, and move forward with the younger guys, Kennard, Demboya, guys like that. And that's just where I'm at. And I know that's a controversial pick, and you certainly can make an argument that you should keep Blake, and if he comes back, he's a trade asset or just a good player. I just don't think I'm there. I think that the whole Blake Griffin thing is probably over in Detroit as we know it, and I would rather just kind of cut bait and move on if I was the Pistons. And last up now, a younger team with some difficult decisions to make here, the Cleveland Cavaliers, with 10 players under contract. And you could make a similar argument here for Kevin Love that I just made for Blake Griffin. You should leave him unprotected, that you should, try and get out of the contract. But the injury issues aren't the same for Kevin Love. Yeah, he hasn't been incredibly healthy, but it's not like he just lost basically an entire season due to injury the way that Blake Griffin did. So I'm going to keep him here, and I'm going to leave Dante Exum and Alfonso McKinney unprotected. Obviously, you want to keep Kevin Porter, you want to keep Darius Garland, you want to keep even someone like Andre Drummond with a high salary. He still has some value moving forward, or just as a big expiring contract and a good player for the Cavaliers. And I'd rather have, Jetty Osman, Dylan Windler than I would Dante Exum and Alfonso McKinney, and that's all it comes down to. I just like those players better. And maybe Dante Exum figures it out with a different team, but I think it's going to be really difficult for him to crack an NBA rotation moving forward. And McKinney is a guy that jumped around to a couple of different teams after, impressing a bit with the Warriors and then landing eventually with the Cavs on a multi-year deal. I just would rather have, the potential moving forward of someone like Windler or even Osman moving forward. You could make that argument if you want to against some of those guys, but for me, that is where I'm at. And now we take a look here at the players that we have added to the draft pool in this division. Some really, really interesting names. I could definitely see a team, taking a chance on someone like Jeremy Lamb coming back well from his injury and being a really positive player. Blake Griffin is obviously the biggest name here. Other players like Thaddeus Young could potentially provide value, and then some younger guys like DJ Wilson, Dante Exum, that you could still take a chance on as well. So this, in my opinion, and I said this in the previous video, the episode right before this is the most interesting, group that we've had so far, and provides the most talent to this expansion draft of any division to this point. It just has to do with some of the unique circumstances that some of these teams are in, like the Blake Griffin situation, and you know, the Thaddeus Young thing as well, and Jeremy Lamb. So really interesting division, and I'm excited to move forward, as I said, into the Southwest Division, I believe is what I said. The Mavs, the Rockets, teams like that, the Spurs, and I'm excited to continue to move forward with this series and get into that division as well. But yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.